Hello everyone, I am Barbaros and welcome back to the channel. Today I am joined by a very special guest from Budapest, Nick Wittman, an American actor, filmmaker, and stuntman currently living and working in Hungary. Nick and I first met back in 2023 while we were both working on the Turkish series El Turco in Budapest. And since then, he has been involved in some exciting international productions, and I'm really looking forward to talking about his journey. Nick, welcome. It's great to have you here, and thank you for accepting my invitation. How are you?
No, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
To start off, I would like to hear your story. How did you originally end up in Budapest, and what made you decide to stay and build a career there?
So it's kind of a long story, but we have time. When I was in high school, I used to make short films. I'm originally from Indiana, which is in the middle of the United States. Nobody goes there. It's called flyover country. But when I was in high school, I used to make a lot of short films and things. And I had like a camcorder and like a really crappy editing program. And we used to bootstrap the tools that we had to like make things as creatively as possible. But anyway, my dream was to go and be a director and work in movies and things. But I'm from Indiana. I don't have any connections to the film industry. I do now. I didn't then. And, in the United States as well, if you want to go to film school, it's incredibly expensive. I didn't want to go, $150,000 into debt and then move to LA and then wind up working in a grocery store or something. So I set the dream on hold. My brother and I have an identical twin brother. We left home with nothing we were 20 after high school. We hitchhiked to California, did the hippie thing for a few months, got jobs on cruise ships on the East Coast and, hitchhiked all around. And then we bought one-way tickets from New York to London, traveled overland from London through Europe. I got to Budapest. I met a girl. I stayed. We owned a hostel. We were running a hostel together. And while we were running the hostel, I had the opportunity to be an extra on World War Z.
It's the same worldwide. Is anyone doing better than we are?
So they shot the original third act of World War Z, they shot here. I think the total budget that they shot here was like $40 million or something. It was crazy. The whole third act of World War Z was a reshoot. So the original third act they shot here, it was set in Moscow in the wintertime. And you know how in World War Z, the zombies are very fast, like they run really quickly. They're the fast moving zombies. Well, this was Moscow in a blizzard in the wintertime, so the zombies were all frozen and slow. It was this huge medieval style like battle in like an open field with melee weapons, and it was crazy. Anyway, I was on the set there. I didn't know anything about acting. I'd never acted in anything before. So the scenario is, it's just after Brad Pitt's plane has been shot down in the film and it crashes. In this version of the film, they capture him, they take him to this facility in Moscow, which they're using as a factory to manufacture weapons to fight the zombies. So there are all these slaves that are slaves of the Russian military. So these Russian soldiers, and they're holding these people captive to make weapons to fight the zombies. We all played slaves, and Brad Pitt was one of the slaves. And at one point when we're shooting, the Russian soldiers come in and they inform all the slaves they're going to throw them out to the zombies. They come in, they're yelling at us. We're supposed to act scared. I didn't know anything about acting scared. I was doing stupid shit with my face, Then they get to Brad Pitt. They get to his close-ups. And they tell all the extras, so I was like, I didn't want to I decided I broke the rules a little bit. I snuck behind Video Village and I was able to watch Brad Pitt play scared from about 2 meters away, 3 meters away. And I was able to watch him on the monitor, and it was all in the breath. It was all in the internal thought process. Right. And it clicked for me. Like that was my first acting lesson. I've carried it with me ever since then. It's all internal. It's primarily in the breath and the internal thought process. And so then I went to my friend Yanni. They started having auditions for the extras. There were about 1,000 extras. And I went to my friend Yanni and I said, I think they're going to ask us to play scared. And I told him what I watched Brad Pitt do. And I showed him. And he goes, yeah, that's how you do it. So they had auditions for the extras. They auditioned us. And out of 1,000 people, they wound up picking me and my friend Yanni to be the main zombie fighters next to Brad Pitt for like 2 weeks of the shoot. It was my very first film, the very first film I worked on, proper film. And it's still to this day is probably the craziest films that I've ever been on. It was insane. And from then on, I was like, oh, you know what? I can do this. This is what I'm going to do. I mean, I remember, I wanted to work in movies, but I found a way in. And I thought, Well, I've watched what the stunt guys are doing, and I thought, well, I can do that. So I started doing stunt training. I became a stuntman, and I wound up doing stunt work for about 4 years. And while I was doing the stunt work, I was on set. I learned like technical aspects of working on a film set, orientation to camera, how to hit a mark, lighting basics, set etiquette. I saw what the actors were doing, and I thought, hey, I can do that. So I started going to auditions locally. Usually, they have smaller roles on the local level. Over time, the roles that are available for local hire have gotten bigger and bigger, but back then they were quite small. So I started going to auditions, and I started getting cast. And being an American living here, big Hollywood films coming through, I have the stunt background. A lot of them are big budget action films. So I was just a shoe-in, and they started calling me all the time. And the smaller roles got bigger and bigger. There's this saying, they say there are no small roles, only small actors. Like actors say that to make themselves feel better. There are such things as small roles. When you walk in and you offer a coffee and you walk out, that's a small role. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally okay, but it's a small part. And that's okay. But so I started doing small parts, and they got bigger and bigger. My first proper, let's say proper role, I was a recurring character on a show called Mars. And I was in 2 seasons of that, like 12 out of 14 episodes or something like that. I don't remember the exact number, but I had it was a proper role, that went for 2 years. And then from there, it was just a lot of bigger stuff. And I've been the lead on features before, relatively small films, but still it's great to get in there and carry, when you're a lead on something, you're carrying the thing. So yeah, I got into acting about 10 years ago. I've been a working actor ever since. I've produced a few things, a few shorts. I had the opportunity to be a producer on a series that I invited the producers over a few years ago. That was definitely a learning experience. I took a lot of the stuff that I learned from that show, and I used it. I went down to Kosovo and I shot my own film. It was my very first film. It's a short called Fever. So I directed, I acted, I designed and managed the practical effects, I coordinated stunts, and I edited. We shot it in 2 days. We did have a small budget, but it's a 15-minute piece. Shot it in 2 days, 2 separate locations, action, blood effects. There's a head that gets blown off, because it was a pretty tall order for 2 days. But I think it wound up great. It's not really available for public view yet. I'll let you know, Barbaros, when it is. And right now, I'm in the process of putting together a teaser trailer for an adaptation of the Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. Really going to lean into practical effects on that. I love horror. There have been several H.P. Lovecraft adaptations over the past decade or so, but they're all set in present day. And I think the reason they do that is because they're generally shot in North America, and they have them set in present day to save on the budget. But I live in Hungary. We have the architecture and the settings here to do a period appropriate adaptation. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I got going on. Yeah.
I would like to talk about the Brutalist, because you were also
Sure.
involved in the Brutalist, and it's
Yeah.
one of the most prestigious films of 2024. How
Yeah.
did you get involved in that project? What was your experience on the set?
So I didn't have very much experience with it. I got a call for a job. They told me it was a lower budget film. And I did a self-tape. They called me in. The thing is, I saw the film, and I believe there were about 3 actors locally who wound up in the film. There was me and a friend of mine named Jeremy Wheeler and one other guy. But we're the only ones that actually made the cut. I only had 1 day on set. I work on a lot of films. It's so interesting how when you've worked on quite a few things, you never really know. When you're on set, you can't tell what the success of the project is going to be. You show up, as an actor, especially local hire, you show up, you do your days. Generally, people are quite nice. You go, you have your trailer, you have your assistant, you go to set, you do your scenes, you meet the actors, but there's no way to tell, really, what the quality is going to be when it comes out the other end. Also, I had a relatively small scene. There's a scene at the beginning of the film where he's waiting in line outside of a soup kitchen, and I was the guy that was in charge of the soup kitchen, and I'm the one that tells everybody to go away, that we're closed, we're closed, get out of here, I tell them to shoo.
Did you have any interaction with the director, Brad Corbett?
Yeah, I did the scene. He said, yeah, good. Can you be a bit more upset? Okay, so I did it upset, and then came back. He's like, all right, now be less mean, it's just business. Okay, it wasn't a big, there's not much subtext to to that character, so there's not much direction really. I had latitude to improvise a bit. Yeah, I basically spent half a day just yelling at Adrian Brody because I tell everybody to leave, and then he's the last one to go. And I forget what he says. He says something to me, and then I shout something at him. And it's funny because when you've been on film sets for a while, I've probably been on 60 films now, and I'm so used to seeing famous people leading on films and stuff. And after a while of doing it, it's very business-like. You show up, and the thing is, I know I'm only there for a day. Now, how many people are coming through? I'm not going to go and have a conversation with Adrian Brody. I mean, I'll say hi. He came up to me. We're shooting. He arrived on set. He came up to me, introduced himself. I said, hello, very nice to meet you. And then we got down to business. But it's not like, there's no reason to be buddy. He's nice. He's professional. He's nice. I've seen him on set before. But it is funny, yeah, after a while, just kind of how nonplussed you are encountering, pretty famous people and the professional understanding that you gain after a while. The Brutalist is one of those I had no idea that it was going to be, Oscar nominated. I only saw a small sliver of the script. It was done by a relatively small local production service company called Proton. When it started getting all this Oscar buzz, yeah, it's a pleasant surprise. You don't really expect that, and it's nice to just take part.
I couldn't believe it was done under 10 million budget and 33 days of shooting days. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Maybe
very interesting numbers.
Yeah, interesting numbers. Okay, maybe we cannot trust the budget numbers. We really don't know how much it was spent, of course. But
yeah.
It was. But you had the knowledge that it was on the lower end. It wasn't like a very big
yes.
budget.
Well, I know they certainly saved money on me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. The thing is, there's no way for me to know. I mean, what I've heard through the grapevine is, oh, they said it was 10 million. Okay. I sure it wasn't 30 million, it's still like relatively low budget for what it was. Yeah. But I think that was also part of the marketing.
Let's talk about El Turco. Of course, you first met on the set of El Turco. How was that experience for you as part of a large international co-production? Turkish-Hungarian. And what did you take away from that project?
I got associated with El Turco because a friend of mine was the stunt coordinator, second unit director, and they needed a stunt guy who was a native English speaker, and that's, what I do. And I play a character named Rutger, who is the right-hand man of the main bad guy for the first 3 episodes or so. I have a pretty sizable sword fight with Can Yaman. Well, it's the first Turkish production I've worked on. It was definitely interesting seeing the interface between Hungarians and Turks. I'm used to working on American productions. So I'm used to working on international co-productions. It's generally American core crew and then Hungarian ancillary crew, or, some of the department heads might be Hungarian. It's interesting to see how, when you're working on an international co-production, the kind of miscommunication that can happen is the same. So it doesn't matter the language. You're going to run into the same bridges of communication have to be built. I think that the Turkish crew, a lot of them came from a kind of a Turkish, as far as I know, they came from a bit of a Turkish soap opera background. The Turkish ethic and approach to filmmaking is much different than, let's say, the Western approach or what's now become the Hungarian approach, which is the Turks move very, very quickly. One of the guys that I was on set with was talking about how they'll shoot epics, essentially soap opera epics, but they'll shoot epics, like they'll do a 3-hour show, they'll shoot in like 2 weeks, which is really crazy. That's so fast. But the partnership between the Turks and the Hungarians was that the Hungarians were able to tell, on this production, we had more time, right? We had a bigger budget, it was a different approach. So they were able to so there was this kind of Turkish efficiency and like the willingness to power through, but also that was kind of counterbalanced by the Hungarians who were saying, no, it's okay. We can actually take our time to really create something of value here. I think it was an interesting mix to see how they interacted with each other.
I was in Budapest in 2009, and I was in a workshop at Korda Studios
Yes.
in Budapest, and that was recently opened at the time. So it was interesting to go back to the same Korda Studios after so many years. Of course, we weren't inside, we were just in front of it. I think you didn't have any shooting there. I don't remember.
I didn't work at
Yeah.
Korda. We were at Gokdemir, and then we were on location. So we were at Gokdemir, was like a medieval set, and then we were on location in the woods for my scene.
I remember the first day I met you, it was the test day.
Yes.
It was the first day, it was a test day, and I came up to you and I told you, you had lines, you had dialogue, and you were on a horse.
And I had wings.
You had wings as well, which we didn't use, I think, later. And then I told you, do you have British accent or and then you told me, yeah, because they told me to use the British.
I did my best. I was supposed to. So it's funny when you play in international productions, when you're supposed to be. So our characters are supposed to be Polish in El Turco. So I'm Polish, but they want a British accent, but I'm American. It's funny on movies and things that how these a British accent just indicates you're a foreigner,
So I would like to get back to more general stuff now. You are working in Budapest at a time when the city is like a major hub for Hollywood and international productions. Recently, there has been a lot of discussion around Donald Trump's proposed tariffs on films shot outside of the United States. Have you noticed any concerns or early effects of this news within the Budapest production scene? And how do you think this might impact international productions in Hungary over the next couple of years?
So the nature of the film business, so there are already a lot of things happening right now, with the advent of AI generated video and strikes in the United States and unaffordability in the US and questions regarding distribution and new distribution models through streaming and all this stuff. Everybody talks about it ad nauseum. Even without all that stuff, filmmaking is a very, very risky endeavor. It's very high risk, can have very high rewards if you have a huge hit, but the likelihood of that is quite small. You have to invest, generally speaking, you have to invest a lot to get some back. It's kind of a fringe investment because of how unpredictable, film distribution and return on investment is. A lot of people are very reticent to invest in film at all. That's at the very base level. Even in the 1960s, this was a problem. Well, now you have the advent of all this other stuff that's going on. Like I said, AI, changes to distribution models, theaters are going away, all this other stuff. In addition to all that stuff, now you have perceived instability in one of the aspects of financing. Essentially, the way it works is, at least with independent productions, I don't know how studios do it actually, but the way independent productions work is they'll package a project, they'll have a script and a director, and they'll sign certain talent which they believe can draw a certain audience. They'll get a line producer to draw up a budget, which, if it's a reliable line producer, the entertainment bank that they wind up going to can use that budget. It's a bankable budget. They can take that package and they can pre-sell it. They can pre-sell distribution to various territories through distributors. So they take it to distributors, and then they'll buy the distribution rights for the product for specific territories. So you have a certain percentage which is covered by distribution. Then, so that distribution guarantee, those distribution guarantees are used as collateral for loans, right? Another piece of the puzzle is you'll have, let's say, for example, in Hungary, you have a 30% tax credit, right? So you have the budget of the film, you consult with the Hungarian Film Commission, and they'll also give a guarantee of 30% tax credit. So 30% of the total budget will be delivered in the form of tax credits. Those tax credits can then also, they're another form of collateral which is used in the package, which is presented to the bank for the initial financing. The point is, you have all these different pieces that are going on. The reason why people come to Hungary is because the United States is incredibly expensive, primarily because of unions. the way that unions are connected in the entertainment industry. They create a lot of red tape. So even if a production is willing to bite the bullet and accept higher costs, there's a lot of regulations about what they can actually do in the filming process, which makes the filming process slower, more onerous. Getting permits in LA is notoriously difficult. You know, all these kinds of things. My fear, so yes, so the question was, does the prospect of tariffs, like, is it chilling the film industry here? I would say yes, because it's introducing an element of unpredictability into an industry that's already incredibly unpredictable and is in a state of flux. So yes, I hope people, you know, enjoy the lesson about film financing. Is kind of I went on kind of a tangent there, but yes, in short, yes, it's because of appetite for risk.
But do you see a decline of productions being made
Right.
in Budapest, or is the number still the same, or do you see a decline?
So there's a situation right now in Budapest that the Three Body Problem came here. They're shooting right now. Dune Prophecy is shooting here. The Dune film also shot here. There are a lot of big productions that come through. The issue right now is there is a cap on the total amount of tax credit fund which is available. When the Three Body Problem came here, they filed for access to the film or the tax rebate. They filed for 2 seasons at once, and it's an incredibly expensive series. So as far as I understand, what happened this year is the Three Body Problem essentially soaked up all the available capital for the tax credit. So the way that the tax credit works is big, like industrial producers, they can purchase tax credits. So they'll purchase the tax credits at a cut rate. So let's say it offsets their tax liability. So if you got a $100 million film, you have $30 million worth of tax credit, a company can buy $30 million worth of taxes for $25 million, right? So they can cut like $5 million off their tax burden, right? This is the way it works. The capacity for the tax credit to work is limited by the industrial capacity of the country, right? So there's an upper limit on available capital for the credit. So if you have a series that's like $100 million a season and they file for 2 seasons at once, that's a really sizable burden on the tax credit structure. So
they are taking a big chunk. They are taking a big chunk of the,
Right. So I think the primary issue right now in Hungary is that. So essentially for 2025, they've suspended new applications for the year for the tax credit. But according to the press releases and things, they're gonna start things. They're gonna reopen submissions for 2026. So as far as number of productions, yes, because of really large productions soaking up the capital pool, but actually the business right now is doing better than it's done in a few years. The film industry is incredibly capital intensive. It takes a long time to get capital mobilized for anything. It's possible that a lot of this stuff that's going on now, this is the product of stuff that started 2 years ago. You know, Trump talking about tariffs is not going to affect the productions this year. I can definitely see it affecting the productions next year. Also, Hungary, there are some political issues in Hungary. There's an election next year. The viability of the film, the tax credit is being called into question. There are a lot of things in flux right now in Hungary. So that's regarding Hungary. Regarding the efficacy or the viability of the tariff that Trump proposed, that's a different question. I could talk about that as well. But the viability of it is not really relevant to the chilling effect that it has on the industry, because it's just about appetite for risk and kind of trying to get ahead of a risk before it happens. Trump even saying stuff like that is bad for the industry here anyway.
Thank you very much, Nick, for this great talk. Before we wrap up, I would like to, ask for your advice for aspiring actors or filmmakers, who want to work on international, sets, and move their career abroad like you. What advice would you give them for anyone, trying to make a film career in this highly complex and competitive industry?
I would say the easiest way is to be born in a country which has a good tax credit. Other than that, if you can move somewhere which has a good tax credit infrastructure, do that. Find a niche, find something that you can do. So this is the film industry in general. I'll get to actors in a second. Find something that you can do really well that relates to filmmaking and find a place where the filmmaking is happening and, just talk to people, offer a favor. In my experience, the business works on favors. There's a quote that my dad, when I was young, he told me, he said, money isn't made in the selling, money is made in the buying. You buy a favor with a favor. And essentially, favors have the capacity for infinite value appreciation. Do as many favors as you can. If you can do a favor in the film industry, always do a favor if you can. Now, if you're not in the position to, if you have to take the money, take the money. Or if it's like a big budget production or something like that, yeah, take the money. But in the instance that you can do a favor and it would be valuable for somebody, always do the favor if you can. I think that's very important. It's also important in the ethic of like supporting other filmmakers. As far as being an actor, I would not advise anybody to try to be an actor. It's really crazy. I happened to fall into it and I found a niche like point of access and like backdoor by which I could do it. You have very, very little capacity for accommodating for risk and for charting your own path as an actor. You're so subject to the whims of other people. And many times it doesn't have anything to do with your quality as an actor. It has to do with your look. And generally speaking, when they're casting roles, they're not looking for the best actor. They're looking for the actor who fits the part, who's good enough. They're not looking for the best. There's so many aspects of it that are connected to marketing. I would say lean into unique market positioning, get good headshots, get a good reel, make a website, market your stuff. You have to be so good and you have to be positioned on the market in such a way that you're undeniable. They look at you and go like, oh, this is the person. What I'll say as far as filmmakers generally, you just have to make your stuff. Nobody's going to come save you. Nobody's going to do it for you. At the end of the day, nobody cares. You can kill yourself making a short film and still you're going to have a hard time getting people to watch it. You just got to make the stuff. Don't worry about external validation or external definitions of success. If you are in the film industry because you're looking for validation externally, you're going to have a really, really bad time. Like I said, nobody cares, right? I just found, I'm really interested in practical organic effects. I'm going to incorporate them as part of this adaptation that I'm making. And I looked up the guy who did the organic space effects for The Fountain. I had to go into old Cinefex issues from like 20 years ago and read, it's like a 30-page article about the making of The Fountain. And I had to go and I had to find this guy's name. I found him. I found his website. I found his Instagram. And he's got all these crazy optical and organic effects posted on his Instagram and things. He's got 800 followers. If you've seen The Fountain and you look at the space effects from The Fountain, they made all the base material for those effects. They were composited in post, but the base material that they used, they made it for $140,000 over the course of, I think it was 2 months. It's cheaper. They made the most brilliant space effects you've ever seen in a film for cheaper than a single CGI sequence. And I go and I find the guy, the mastermind behind it, and he's got 800 followers on Instagram. The fact of the matter is, nobody cares. You have to do this. You have to be in this because it's something that's in your heart. It's your vocation. It's your calling. Otherwise, it's going to kill you. Well, you'll probably quit rather quickly, but the motivation has to come from here. That's what I would say.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. This has been quite inspiring and I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. Do you have any, last words? Would you like to finish? Do you have any would you like to say something before we wrap up?
I will say one thing. In my experience, I've worked on all caliber of films. I worked on huge, $150 million films with the biggest names in the world. And I've worked on little indie things all the way down to that, all the way to like student films. And what I'll say is the way that the film industry is going now is there are a lot of people in relatively high positions that I would say who don't care about movies and they're not generalists. They don't have a general range of competencies for filmmaking. If you care about filmmaking and you want to work in films, become someone who has a wide, especially if you want to be a director, have a wide range of competencies and look for every opportunity to synthesize as much knowledge as possible from various departments and bring it and bring those things together, because you will outshine 90% of people that are working directors now. If you just really care and you take the time to read and learn and don't get pigeonholed into a specific specialty, but kind of, yeah, be that generalist. I think that if you can pull stuff together using that general synthesis, you'll outshine, even starting out, you outshine a majority of people that are trying to make it. But you really have to care about it. And you have to put the time and effort in.
Thank you, Nick. Today I talked with Nick Wittman from Budapest. And if you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments if you would like to see more interviews with filmmakers working abroad. Thank you very much, and see you on the next video.